Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Thiravanachari Yamuna Thiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Thiravanachari Yamuna Thiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Good morning, everyone. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from 24th chapter of which canto? Okay, good, just checking. We've been doing this 11th canto for a while. And the title is The Philosophy of Sankhya. So Krishna continues his instructions on how to understand this material nature that we're in. He's telling Uddhava. And it's an important thing to discuss because we're in this material world. So we need to understand it. So let's do the verses together and we can take turns reading. And then we'll focus on the last two. The last two are really sweet, so we'll focus on those. But let's lead up to it by reading the translations. And I might pause in between and just share a few things. So, Amma Jnana Timirandasya, Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umidithamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So text number 1. Lord Sri Krishna said, "Now I shall describe to you the science of Sankhya, which has been perfectly established by ancient authorities. By understanding this science, a person can immediately give up the illusion of material duality." Yes, now we can read. Yeah.
Originally, during the Krita Yuga, when all men were very expert in spiritual discrimination, and also previous to that, during the period of annihilation, the seer existed alone, non-different from the seen object.
So just a pause here. So who's the seer here? The seer means, what is it? Yeah, but who's being described here? Yeah, the ultimate seer. Although, yeah, okay. That's how the translation and the purport describe it. As Krishna being the seer, there's no difference between the Lord who becomes the only seer and then his manifestation, right? What he sees. So, Krita Yuga. Let's see. Krita Yuga is the first age, so it's another name for Satya Yuga. Yeah. Okay, text 3.
That one absolute truth, remaining free from material dualities and inaccessible to ordinary speech and mind, divided himself into 2 categories, the material nature and the living entities who are trying to enjoy the manifestations of that nature.
Of these 2 categories of manifestation, one is material nature, which embodies both the subtle causes and manifest products of matter. The other is the conscious living entity designated as the enjoyer.
When material nature was agitated by my glance, the 3 material modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, became manifest to fulfill the pending desires of the conditioned souls.
From these modes arose the primeval sutra, along with the Mahatattva. By the transformation of the Mahatattva was generated the false ego, the cause of the living entities is bewilderment.
Okay, pause here. So we all are very familiar with this experience of being bewildered by our own false egos. I'm sure that everyone in the room has had a time when the false ego kind of took over and we thought that we were us, we thought that we were this body, we thought we were the mind, we thought we were the talents that we had, right? We thought we were something special, or when someone glorified us, we felt like, yes, this is me, this is like, So all of that is a cause of bewilderment. And what do you think that means when Krishna's saying that the false ego causes bewilderment? How is that? Yes.
It means that we don't perceive things correctly. Our mind actually goes deeper into the sense that we're the body.
Yes, so we don't perceive things correctly. We're distorted. We're having a false view of things, false identity.
And that results in confusion.
Yeah. It also results in a lot of pain and distress, because anytime we identify with something that's not really us, it's going to end up being taken from us, and we're going to have to go through that process of grieving to what we are attached to that extent. To the degree we're attached to something, to that degree we get distressed when it's taken. Yeah.
So this translation reminds me of Bhagavad Gita verse Prakriti Priyamanani Guni
Karvimuratma kartaham iti manyate. So we, based on our false ego, we think that we are the doer, and that's an illusion, because sometimes when things go well, we think that it's because of us, but when then things don't go well, we are bewildered, like, why is the same thing not happening? We are frustrated, like, we cannot find out the reason. We don't know that there is a higher authority controlling. We can only desire, but the results are based on something higher, not based off us.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful point to come to, is to realize we're not controllers. It's true that when things are going well, it can be tempting to feel like, yeah, I'm controlling this. I'm figuring out my career track. It's all going well. It's going exactly as planned. When something all of a sudden happens to us, we realize, oh, I'm actually more like a puppet of material nature being, pulled along, and I think it's me doing this. But yeah, so that's a really good point. Any other thoughts on the false ego and bewilderment? Anyone bewildered by this verse? Okay, so let's move on to text 7.
False ego, which is
I think it stopped working.
false ego, which is the cause.
Sure you can.
False ego, which is the cause of physical sensation, senses of the mind, encompasses both spirit and matter, and manifests in 3 varieties, in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance.
So I just want to pause here and say that this is very interesting that in the purport it's described that the false ego is it a combination of the eternal conscious soul and the temporary unconscious body that it resides in. So it's kind of this interesting mix. There's a Sanskrit word in this verse that means encompassing both spirit and matter. Interesting, right? That's why the false ego is so powerful. It's this combination of the soul meeting with the body. And because the soul desires to exploit the creation of God, he's bewildered by the 3 modes of nature. So these modes of nature come from the false ego. Yes?
The false ego, does it have its own consciousness, or is it that the soul is perceiving the false ego thinking, or how does it work?
Well, it's not a person, it's an energy. So let's see here. The false ego is the illusory combination of the eternal conscious soul and the temporary unconscious body. Because the spirit soul desires to exploit illicitly the creation of God, he is bewildered by the 3 modes of nature and assumes an illusory identity within the material world. So it's an energy that we kind of plug into this false ego, and it's not a separate entity. It's just we're using this energy, we're plugging into it, and then we become bewildered by it. So struggling to enjoy, he becomes more and more entangled in the complexities of illusion, and this only increases his anxiety. So, yeah. Let's see, the next verse is also about the false ego. So let's see if it adds some more to that.
From false ego in the mode of ignorance came the subtle physical perceptions, from which the gross elements were generated. From false ego in the mode of passion came the senses, and from false ego in the mode of goodness arose the 11 demigods.
Okay.
By me, all these elements combined to function in an orderly fashion, and together gave birth to the universal egg, which is my excellent place of residence.
The egg of the universe, it's andam is the Sanskrit word. Okay, continue.
I myself appeared within that egg, which was floating on the causal water, and from my navel arose the universal lotus, the birthplace of self-born Brahma.
So it's not literally an egg, it's just the description of this creation. It's like an egg being formed from the Lord looking at the material creation. But it's not literally an egg, like a chicken egg or something. But it's called the universal egg, so we understand that it's born from Krishna. Here in this description of Lord Brahma, it says born from the lotus, right? So in the purport it said that Brahma is the most powerful mystic. His body, which pervades all material existence, is material. Even though he's this powerful mystic, he has a material body. Whereas the person that he's coming from, the lotus flower is coming from, Vishnu, is supreme and never, he's not material, right? His body's not material, but Lord Brahma has a material body. So in the purport, that distinction was made that Lord Brahma has a material body, Krishna has a spiritual body. So Brahma is a title, right? So different personalities take that role. So it's the role. He must have a name too. He must have like a, like a first person. We have like Mr. So-and-so, like, but when you get to know them closer, you get to know their personal name. So I don't know, it's a good question. Yeah. All right. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the post. Yeah. I guess that's the living entity who is performing that service is that's his role so fully that's how he becomes known as that post, right? Okay, so next, text 11.
Lord Brahma, the soul of the universe being endowed with the mode of passion, performed great austerities by my mercy, and thus created the 3 planetary divisions called Bur, Bhuvar, and Swar, along with their presiding deities.
Okay, next.
Heaven was established as the residence of the demigods, Bhuvarloka as that of the ghostly spirits, and the earth system as the place of human beings and other mortal creatures. Those mystics who strive for liberation are promoted beyond these 3 divisions.
So this verse, I was thinking how this creation is so vast and there's something for everyone. Like there's something for everyone to relate to. There's, I really find it fascinating to read encounters of people who've had out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, they're called. And depending on oftentimes if someone's very religious in a certain way, they'll encounter that particular personality, and it's usually Christianity in this country, right? So I just read one where she had an encounter with Jesus Christ, right? Like in heaven, the heavenly. So I was thinking the planet where Jesus, wherever you can meet Jesus Christ. So actually, according to what we aspire for, we can meet any of those. We can eventually get to any of those if we have that desire. But of course, the bhakti yogas, the devotees of Krishna, they want to go to the supreme abode of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. But whatever the jiva, Krishna reciprocates with whatever the jiva wants, really. So if someone has a strong desire to go and go to Bhuvar Loka, meet the ghostly spirits, and their consciousness they become focused on that, and that's the consciousness they develop, then they can attain that. So it's quite incredible that there's so much free will for us to explore in this creation. In the purport, it's said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so merciful that he's promoting the most fallen victims of Kali Yuga, meaning us, beyond these 4 planets and even beyond Vaikuntha to the supreme planet of Lord Krishna. So one of the amazing things about studying, even though this might be a little tedious or like, we got to think about the universe and it all feels like tiring for the brain on a, Tuesday morning. But one of the amazing things that happen when we study this is that we get this sense that this creation is so vast and so incredible, and it's so, it's all coming from Krishna, right? This huge universe that we reside in. And here we are, these little tiny jivas in Kali Yuga, struggling to control our mind, right? We're just struggling to control our tongue. And yet we have this incredible opportunity, like we're kind of there's somebody described, the rejects of the previous yugas, right? The leftovers, kind of like that idea. So even though we're in that space, we have this incredible gift from Lord Chaitanya that takes us beyond this entire universe, beyond all of these planets that are described. So, yeah, just to remember that can be it can fill us with gratitude. Like, wow, what a gift I've received. It's incredible. All right, text 13.
Lord Brahma created the region below the earth for the demons and the Naga snakes.
In this way, the destinations of the three worlds were arranged as the corresponding reactions for different kinds of work performed within the three modes of nature.
Okay, next. And if you have any questions during, you can also say it, speak out.
By mystic yoga, great austerities and the renounced order of life, the pure destination of Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka are attained. But by devotional yoga, one achieves my transcendental abode.
And actually, in that verse, it says Bhakti Yogasya, of devotional service. I just like to pause here for a second. So, just in this purport, I wanted to point out there was one really nice statement that in the residence of the spiritual satisfaction, no desire for personal satisfaction. They have plenty of personal satisfaction, just they don't have the desire for it. Okay, so text, yeah. It's hard to imagine, right? So that's why we have to, because we are beings that have lots of desire. We're naturally part and parcel of Krishna, who is full of desire. So we have to have some suppository for our desire, and that's where Krishna comes in. And when we love Krishna, then we become satisfied ourselves. So we have no more interest in trying to attain our own. Text 15.
All results of fruit of work have been arranged within this world by me, the Supreme Creator, acting as the force of time. Thus one sometimes rises up towards the surface of this mighty river of the modes of nature, and sometimes again submerges.
Okay, so I like this sentence in the purport here. It says, in both cases, whether you're promoted to the higher planetary systems or pushed into a miserable condition like this waves, in both cases one is drowning within the mighty river of material existence. So you might think, wow, I have it good, but you're still drowning. And so that's important to remember. It would be like if a rich person was drowning and a poor person was drowning. Like one of them owns a lot of money, but they're still drowning, right? It's just, yeah. So you wouldn't want to flaunt your, like, look at me, I'm so great, and you're drowning. It's kind of a silly situation. Text 16.
Whatever features visibly exist within this world, small or great, thin or stout, certainly contain both the material nature and its enjoyer, the spirit soul.
So I was thinking how even the tiniest creature, like a mouse or a bug, they also contain the spirit soul within them. Amoebas, right? Yes.
I wanted, just as a result of this verse, may I make a comment
Sure.
going back to Govinda's question about the false ego? So
Yeah.
the material nature possesses no consciousness, and it's basically dead matter, either subtle or gross. So it's like a set of glasses, as it were, that gets put on. And the false ego is an amalgamation of certain energies based upon our desires and our past actions that makes us perceive ourselves in a particular way. But the false ego itself has no consciousness. It's just, it's an amalgamation of material illusory energies.
That's a really good analogy, right? The glasses. Putting on what's in front of us is what we see. I remember, when I was a kid, we had these little orange glasses. I think they probably still make them with the plastic, and you look at a book and it looks 3D, that kind of thing. Or you go to a movie. Has anybody been to one of those 3D movies where you wear those glasses and it's like a 3D experience? And if you take it off, the movie's just kind of ordinary. And everybody around you is going, whoa, like something's popping out, but you're not seeing it. You're just like, But if you put on the glasses, you're like seeing like something come out at you on the screen. So So yeah, that's a really good analogy of false ego. Yeah.
I want to add to that, there's parasites that kill insects and then take over their brain and then search for food in their own way. So the false ego is like a parasite that's just infected my brain, and then I act to serve it. And I guess you're still alive, but you're still battling this like virus or parasite or something.
Yeah, that's a good analogy as well. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Dana.
I was thinking as these glasses, so then you naturally, because the soul is perceiving, but you're identifying, because you're looking through the glasses, you start to identify with the glasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you forget that you're perceiving, but like, right? Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, it becomes all about whatever you're seeing, and you're not remembering it you as a seer, like who you are separate from that experience. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I have another question or point, but yeah, sometimes I wear glasses and I'll just wear them all day and I'll forget that I have poor eyesight until I take them off.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But so my question is that, like, when you're fully spiritually realized, you see Krishna in everything, right? And like everywhere. So at that point, would that mean then the material is no longer unconscious and it is conscious because it's all Krishna, and you're seeing it as all Krishna?
That it's no longer material? Yeah, well, actually Prabhupada said that once. Then the devotee moves through life, the world becomes Krishna-ized, meaning that it becomes transformed to the devotee. They no longer see anything through the lens of this is mine or I want to enjoy this. It's all through the lens of Krishna. So you're replacing, if you had different glasses, right? So then you're seeing everything through Krishna's energy, right? Ultimately, Yoga Maya, which is the opposite of the other glasses, which is Mahamaya. Yeah, exactly. I would say yes. It becomes transcendentalized. It's still material. It's in the sense of it's still Krishna's material energy, but because it's connected to Krishna, it becomes special and important. Just like Prabhupada said, never kick. Prabhupada was very strict about don't kick things with your foot, for example. Like somebody would move this table, like, just kick it. Or he said because it's being used for Krishna, it should be treated with respect. So the items, also. Yeah.
Also, how strong it is, that it's so strong that it's like you put on, like, those VR things that nowadays people wear. It's so strong that you start to identify with it completely. You completely forget who you are. Like, if you put on those glasses, you just lose track of what is real. Mm-hmm. You're just completely engrossed in this virtual reality. And so I was thinking, we're so conditioned by it that you just completely lose track of who you are. It's pretty crazy, actually.
That's an even more accurate analogy, is those completely submersive experiences, right? Those reality, other worlds that we're in. If you think about imagine if everyone in here was wearing those and everybody's in their own experience, like what it would be like to see a group of people doing that. They're all just responding to nothing. We don't see anything, but they're responding. So in that sense, the higher beings are seeing us that way. We're all just like, oh, we're so caught up in this life. It's so important. But for them, the perspective is different. And yet they have compassion for us. They're not thinking, oh, look at all those crazy people. They're like, let's go help them. Let's remove their, what do you call those things when they put it on like a headset? Yeah, headset. Yeah.
So yesterday afternoon we were reading Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, I think chapter 5, and it was describing how the soul is both operating through and receiving information through like this pair of glasses. Mm. But then when it said, I think in the second canto, there's a place where it is described that bhakti yoga literally dissolves that subtle covering. It dissolves the pair of glasses so that once you get to a certain place, that covering or the glasses are completely gone and it's just direct vision. And since we're parts and parcels of Krishna, therefore we perceive ourselves and everything in that relationship of a Chintya, Beta, Beta Tattva, both one and different. But it's a direct vision.
Yeah, very important to remember that. And it's also, in the material world, if we take our glasses off, like, can't see as well, gotta put it back on. But in the what you're describing is like those glasses are removed, and actually we get the most ultimate supreme vision, that we don't no longer require anything material to function. So yes.
I was thinking also on the subject matter of the spiritual master. You got this VR headset on, and he's like talking to you like, hey, this is not the real thing. You're not really seeing. And so he tries to teach you how to take it off, and he also helps you to take off the headset, so you can actually start to see the reality.
Yeah, that's a nice, I like this analogy, it's growing. Yeah, I was thinking that it's like almost like a spiritual hijacking of the system. You know, they go and they like, hey, warning, you're in a false world, you know, like it blinks across your screen. Yeah, just to remind us that we're in illusion. But the spiritual masters and the guides, our spiritual guides, are so kind that they actually, they relate to us on our level so that we can understand these things at our own pace. So even though they're seeing things from a higher perspective, they're able to kind of, quote unquote, join us to be able to help us remove those, right? To remove that vision. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like how it's like the analogy is building up, and I liked how you said it's like a spiritual hijack. Like, if someone asks us to forcibly remove the headset, we might like not like it. But then what they do is that while we're still wearing like the headset, they change the visual in there. Instead of seeing like some gory thing or something which is not good for us, the scene is changed to like something like spiritual. And then we're attracted to that, and then we're curious like, okay, where did this come from? That might lead us to be more inquisitive and want to listen to the person who's doing that.
Yeah. And Prabhupada said that the paintings in these books are like windows to the spiritual world. So that was the idea, to attract the reader. Like if you're distributing these books and you say, hey, look at all these beautiful plates, right? These paintings. Immediately the person's like, wow, that's a nice entryway. And kind of like a preview. They give us previews of here's what you could have if you switched your program. So, yeah, that's I like this. So I'm gonna jump ahead a little because I want to get to the end of this. There's a lot more description about the way that material creation is manifest and also how it's pulled back into Krishna at the end of the day. Like, so there's one like big verse because it's multiple together, and it's describing how the world unwinds back into Krishna. And yeah, I was just thinking about those movies where you see the backwards, like backwards. What do they call that? There's a name for that, where they rewind and you see like, oh, here's back to the beginning. So that's it's very helpful to read that because it's sobering. It's like, oh yeah, all these things that we think are so permanent and so important, at the end of the day, they all get wound back up. Okay, so let's do verse number 28 and 29, because those are the ending of this chapter, and they're really sweet. So text 28 is, just as the rising sun removes the darkness of the sky, similarly, this scientific knowledge of cosmic annihilation removes all illusory duality from the mind of a serious student. Even if illusion somehow enters his head, or his heart, somehow enters his heart, it cannot remain there. So the purport, just as the brilliant sun removes all darkness from the sky, a clear understanding of the knowledge spoken by Lord Krishna to Uddhava removes all ignorance concocted by the material mind. One will then no longer accept the material body as the self. So in our analogy, they will have removed that virtual reality headset. Even if such illusion temporarily manifests within one's consciousness, it will be driven away by the resurgence of one's spiritual knowledge. So that's also nice. Even if it comes flying back into it, if we get lost again into it, it will again be driven away when we connect with spiritual knowledge. And that's why it's so important to do a daily connection with Krishna, and especially through reading these scriptures. And of course, chanting. But it's like we need that constant reminder, otherwise we just get swayed back up by temporary material illusion, because it's so strong. So then the final verse, text 29, thus I, Krishna, the perfect seer of everything material and spiritual, have spoken this knowledge of Sankhya, which destroys the illusion of doubt by scientific analysis of creation and annihilation. And purport. Lord Shri Krishna has explained that the material mind accepts and rejects many different concepts of life, generating innumerable false arguments about the actual process of perfection. But a person who takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can see everything with clear intelligence. One who understands how the Supreme Lord creates and annihilates can be liberated from material bondage and devote himself to the eternal service of the Supreme Lord. So it has a very happy ending, that chapter. So I wanted to ask you, what is, or I want to tell you what Sankhya, maybe someone here can define it from what you've understood so far. What is Sankhya Yoga? Do you know the definition? Yeah, analytical study of, for what? For what purpose? Yeah, because yoga, right? It's a yoga, so it's a connection. So analytical study to connect to the Supreme. Yes, Prabhu?
It is an analyzation of the material energies for the sake of discerning the difference between spirit and matter.
Yeah.
And also to be able to observe the field of activities, which is the material body and mind, so one can discern whether one is operating at any given moment on one platform of the other, material or spiritual.
That's very nicely said, yeah. So being able to distinguish the two means we know when we're dabbling in one or the other, right? We are able to separate those. And yeah, so it's really that distinguishing matter and spirit, and then being able to pull our mind from matter to spirit. So Sankhya, I was looking up, I was just trying to understand its connection to other types of yoga, and there's actually a verse in Bhagavad Gita that, it's in Bhagavad Gita 5:4, where Karma Yoga and Sankhya are, I was going to say lumped together, but they're very similar. So they're described as being very similar. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, Karma Yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world. So Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga, those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. So it's a similar type thing. So you remember in the Bhagavad Gita, there's the 5th chapter is called Karma Yoga. And then Prabhupada writes action in Krishna consciousness, right? Because he's connecting it to Krishna. But Sankhya and Karma Yoga are the same. Are not the same, but one who is learned knows the unifying aim in these different processes. So they're similar. Because they both require action. So Sankhya is requiring the analysis of our mind. We're analyzing things. We're working to understand, right? Sankhya. And then Karma Yoga is working also in action for Krishna. So both of them can be used to connect to Bhakti Yoga, right? So if we're doing Sankhya, like we're trying to understand these things, we can, how does that differ from Bhakti Yoga? For example, like what if I was to go, wow, the Sankhya Yoga chapter is really inspiring to me. Some of us might be really inspired by it. Some of us might be tired and be like, oh, this is not my thing. But like for some people, like analytical study really gets them excited. So they might think, okay, I want to do this. I want to do Sankhya Yoga. So what would that look like how does that differ from Bhakti Yoga? What might that look like? Or does it? It's a question. Yes.
So the Sankhya analyzing the material energy and the spiritual energy, but in Bhakti, one is just simply worshiping and thinking of the Lord, not giving any mental energy to the material world.
Okay, yes, thank you. Govinda.
In in Sankhya, there's not much devotion. It's more dry on the mental platform, while Bhakti has this rasa. So I think that's one of the biggest differences.
Yeah, yeah. Both great points. There's another point? Yeah.
I think of it like a pyramid of bhakti on top, and then Sankhya would be somewhere underneath, and you could use analytical analysis to meet people where they're at, and then step by step show them a process to bhakti and how to serve Krishna through karma yoga and analytic analysis. Like 1 + 1 equals Krishna, and here's how it makes sense. So to be able to communicate with somebody that's not familiar with it, I think Sankhya would be a tool, and then it being a tool to serve Krishna, it becomes bhakti yoga. So everything is bhakti,
exactly.
depending on your state.
Yeah, so how we use them determines it. Whether we have devotion in the action is what determines it's bhakti. So when we're going through our lives, like one thing I was thinking with the Bhaktivedanta Institute is that is a form of applying Sankhya for the benefit of the world, right? Because they're, like, remember Kandadi Prabhu came and he did that talk on consciousness? That's what he was doing. He was using the Sankhya type philosophy, Sankhya yoga, to demonstrate the difference between consciousness and matter, and like show which one comes first. Does consciousness come first, or does matter come first, right? And so all of those things Sankhya yoga can be used to help in sharing Krishna consciousness as well, to help, like you said, kind of reach people where they're at. And we're living in this world and people want to understand it, so let's use that to help them reach the higher perspectives. Another example would be Srimad Bhagavatam describes how the universe moves through cycles. And some proponents of the Big Bang Theory, they also talk about cyclical ways that this universe was created. But they're missing this big piece of how did the Big Bang, who is behind that, and how did that start? Because they don't know it all. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? So the description of who is behind this creation would be Sankhya Yoga. Like, that would be the missing piece to be added to the discussion. And there's actually a conference at the BI coming up in November, a cosmology conference. So there'll be a lot of people there who are very much analytically oriented, who want to understand these things. And so I was thinking about us when we're going about our day-to-day life. How does this apply to us? So, like, why does Krishna talk to us about this? So we've had a few answers already, like, for reasons why this is here. But one of them is to distinguish matter and spirit. Another one might be to help us understand the incredible position of Krishna, right? The awe, to kind of stay in that mood of awe and reverence. Wow, this supreme creator, look what he's doing. He's created this all, and it's an amazing sequence of events for this universe to be created and then wound back up. And Krishna is so personal that he actually comes into his creation. Remember that part where he said he entered and then Lord Brahma came from him? He doesn't have to, right? He doesn't have to come and, like, he could have just made a creation where he completely stayed separate. But he enters the universe as well to watch over it. And he also enters each one of our hearts, like, comes with each soul. He travels along with each of us through our journey in this universe. So Krishna as a personal God is another thing we can take from this. And then another thing that's helpful is one last point I want to make today is there's something called pramana. Have you heard of that word, pramana? It means, what does it mean? You know it? Evidence, yes. So how do we know what we know, right? What is our evidence for it? So the pramana, so Jiva Goswami spoke a lot on this. So Jiva Goswami spoke on three main ones. There's many types, but he talked about scripture being one, and then observation, like our observation as we move through life, and inference. So inferring things from what we observe and from scripture. So Jiva Goswami said, if you're seeing a difference between what you're observing and scripture, if you're seeing some discrepancy, don't just drop one or the other. He said, then you have to dig down and become more serious. You have to understand how they work together. So he said, actually, if you see discrepancy, you have to resolve it. And the duty of a devotee is to really see, how does scripture apply, and how come it's not matching up? Where am I seeing something and let me find out why, right? Let me find out. And then we find out through speaking to others who have understood this, and we find out through scripture and so on. And so when we're going about our day, we can use, even if we all have our different interests, some of us might be more scientifically oriented, some of us might be more psychologically oriented. That's definitely more my area. Like I like thinking about the modes of nature and how they interact and affect people, that kind of thing. So we all have our different areas of interest, but we can use the idea of Sankhya Yoga as we're going about our days by just being thoughtful. Like, how does this connect? How does that connect? And is this matter or is this spirit? And just starting to ask those questions, just being thoughtful. And then we can add devotion, and then it becomes bhakti, right? So we add devotion to Krishna in our journey. So those are some points, and Prabhupada actually said Krishna consciousness is a science. So he said it needs to make sense. And luckily we have scriptures and chapters like this to have, it makes Krishna consciousness, it gives us a grounded faith in Krishna consciousness, to have like philosophical depth and scientific depth in our literature. You know, it gives credence also to the outside world. It's like, oh yeah, this is not just a sentimental thing, it's actually really solid. So, did you have a question? Yes.
Just a brief comment. So, in the first canto and in other places, Prabhupada brings out the idea that you can't just approach the 10th canto, and especially the rasa dance, without understanding the categories. And so he says that's why we work through the first 9 cantos first, and that would include the idea, he says, people say that God is great, but they don't know how great he really is. But when you read Bhagavatam and you understand the first 9 cantos and you understand how the Lord expands himself and transforms his various energies in order to create Sankhya, then when you approach the 10th canto, you have a grasp that this isn't just a little blue boy who's naughty. He's actually the Supreme Lord. And he's in Vrindavan having pastimes with the gopis. Well, he's got all these other things that are happening, all these relationships that he's, endless number of relationships that he's participating in at the same time.
Yeah. And it helps us to have that full understanding of Krishna, where we don't forget that his real nature, his real position is, we are the tiny jiva, he's the supreme personality of God. And Prabhupada always emphasized that we need to remember Krishna's grandiosity, so we don't forget and take him cheaply or complacently.
So in that sense, it gives us a better grasp of what is meant by simultaneously both one and different.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's a good point. Yes, Govinda.
Since we know Krishna to be the supreme controller, when you read all these things, you can wow, he's controlling so many things. So what about to speak about my insignificant life? He's controlling all the universe and so many things, little elements, and all of this stuff. And then we have our own individual lives that we're trying to, and those things are not really reciprocating with them with love and devotion. They're just material elements. But we are trying to reciprocate, so what to speak of his controlling our lives? Yeah, and then we can deepen our faith, we can trust, because we might not trust, how Krishna's not taking care of me, but when we realize he's taking care of every atom, every piece of grass, right? So one final just conclusion for this is, I know when I was growing up that these sections were a little, when I was a kid, when we're children, these kinds of things are a little boring, right? Like this philosophy, it's like the Sankhya section. But I was thinking how, because you mentioned rasa and taste, right? That's part of bhakti yoga. And so anytime we're reading these sections, every part of the Bhagavatam, we're able to extract some taste. And that's because of the mercy of the devotees, like Prabhupada's purports, the devotees of Prabhupada's purports. They are able to help us extract that rasa, that taste, like, oh yes, it's about my relationship with Krishna. It's about making this personal to my journey in devotion. And so
that can be something we search for when we're getting through the tedious sections or the sections that are harder. Then we can hunt for that, like, where is the nectar in this? Where is it? And we will find it. So by the mercy of the devotees.
When you were asking about what is difference between Sankhya and Bhakti Yoga, I think he was pointing out the problem with just studying Sankhya for the sake of studying it. He said that the fallacy with Sankhya Yoga is, I'm drowning and all you're doing is describing the water, like in what I'm drowning. So that's not good enough. Like, we need to go further than just describing and analyzing the things around us.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Like, imagine if someone's drowning, you just start telling them how they're drowning. Like, yeah, so we want to throw them the life vest. So, yeah, that's where Bhakti Yoga comes in. Okay, if one you have a comment too? Okay.
When Nithai just reminded me that, all we have to do is sing, chant, dance, and eat Krishna Prasadam. But if we want to know why we should do this, then we have the philosophy.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you for class. I forget the word you said when the movie rewinds, but to do that, this all seemed to be building on the concept of the false ego, and then using the false ego as a tool would be Sankhya. Be like, oh, I'm so learned and smart, but then using it in Krishna's honor or his service, it feels like it was just leading up to how to utilize material energy and everything at our disposal in his service. Like a spade is a farm tool, but then it's used as a weapon, and the false ego is present in us for a reason, and I think to identify with it would be false, but to utilize it as an ally would be probably one of the best things you can do. Like, okay, maybe I have a propensity to be egotistical and I fancy myself a learned man, but then I use that learned knowledge in Krishna's honor. But then it layers itself too, like, oh, look at me, I'm over here in Krishna's honor, I'm like untouchable because I'm under his wing, so you can't say anything. So I think the false ego gets stronger the stronger you get and the more learned you become. Like the harder I train, the stronger my demons become. So the battle and the wrestling match just never ends. Your opponents get better.
Yeah, actually that is a trapfall. What do they call it? Pitfall? A pitfall of growing in our devotional service and learning, and especially philosophical learning, is that the false ego does go, ooh, wow, look at me, and it has that. It grows as we grow because we start, if we allow it to. We don't have to allow it to, but if we allow it to, then it goes like, oh yeah, I'm such a great devotee. Everyone look at me. Wow, look at, now I'm doing this. Now I'm taking disciples. Now I'm whatever, right? And it can grow with the as we grow if we don't keep it in check. And how we keep it in check is by always remaining the servant of the servant of the servant. That's how. And then the ego, we don't let it go wild, right? We. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Yeah, exactly. All right. So, was there anything else? Okay. Thank you all for participating. Yeah, we had quite a good discussion, even though subject is we technically call it dry, but that was pretty good, right? We had a lot of. So thank you all. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.